Welcome to Season 3 of the Baby Names Podcast, naming the world one baby at a time. Here are your hosts, the Moss Sisters.
I'm Jennifer Moss, and my sister Mallory couldn't make it today, so we have a special guest co-host, Kees Wiederspan. You've heard us talk about Kees in other episodes. They're the babynames.com social media manager, and they come up with all those fun name games that you see on Facebook and Instagram. So welcome, Kees. Glad to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So our first segment is always interesting names we found since the last episode. And my name is kind of a derivation of my sister's name, Mallory. It's Mallison, Mallison. And it looks like a combination of the names Mallory and Allison, but it's actually an English surname. And according to Surname DB, it dates back to medieval times and means son of or family of Malle, Malle, which was a nickname for Mary. And I think it would be a pretty cool given name, and I've added it to the database. But that got me thinking about the name Mallory, which is said to come from the French meaning unlucky, malheureusement, or from the mallard duck, of which I've always been pretty suspect. But I wonder if Mallory's roots are in Malle also. What do you think, Kees?
I definitely think that could be a possibility. It's really interesting how many names have those similar elements and how often they are related, but sometimes they're really not. It's tough to tell sometimes. It's really interesting.
So we'll head on into the name subject of the week. In part 1, 2 weeks ago, we went over why and how people might change their name. And we spoke with Dr. Karen Panizzi on changing your name for immigration and assimilation. This week, we're talking about changing names as part of gender transitioning.
So first, let's define some terms. A gender transition is the process of shifting towards a gender role, different from that assigned at birth. It can include social transitions, such as a new name, pronouns, and clothing, and medical transitions, such as hormone therapy or surgery. There's gender binary transitioning, which means transitioning from female to male or male to female. There's also gender non-binary transitioning. That can look different for each person, and it can be a social transition, a medical one, or none at all. I'm non-binary myself, and so far a social transition has been the best choice for me personally.
Yeah, it's important to note that everyone's experience is different, and we don't want to generalize by any means.
Yeah, for sure.
We have another guest with us today, Dr. Olivia Danforth, a medical doctor with a family practice in Albany, Oregon, with a focus on LGBT health. She's an executive board member and hotline operator for Trans Lifeline, a national organization offering phone support and microgrants for the transgender community. She also went through her own male-to-female transition several years ago and now lives in Corvallis with her wife and 3 cats. Welcome, Olivia, to the Baby Names Podcast.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
So I've asked Olivia to join us today because we're talking about changing names. Renaming oneself is a big step in anyone's life, but is especially significant for those who are going through a gender transition. Now, Olivia, we've had the discussion on the podcast before, but what is the correct term for one's original or birth name?
I think either of those are all right. Personal preferences vary. Sometimes we also say assigned name. And then the vernacular that you might hear sometimes is dead name, which these days tends to be interpreted as a name that is dead. The actual origin is a little bit darker. It used to be, understood as the name the papers use for you when you're dead.
And what about the term for a person's new name, just their name?
Their name or their affirmed name.
Affirmed name.
That's sometimes language I've seen used.
Now, I have always wanted to address this topic, I think, since 2015 when Caitlyn Jenner announced her new name because it was so public, right?
People got really into it.
Yeah, and I didn't even think about it as part of the transgender process and how important it was until that. What did you think of when she first announced her name was Caitlyn?
I mean, it's fine. It's, I'm not particularly invested in Caitlyn Jenner as a person, but in terms of name choices, it's very much, I would say there's a cultural understanding. It's not really something that is another person's to have strong opinions about.
Right. And the only thing I thought of was thank God she didn't spell it with a K.
Yeah, I don't know. A little flair, a little zazz.
Yeah, but to match all the Kardashians is what I was
Oh,
thinking.
you're
Like,
right. I didn't even think about that.
at least she separated herself from them a little in that respect.
That's interesting because I do think that family affiliation, a lot of people in transition are also in a place where they're either questioning or dealing with alienation or rejection from their families. And I know for me, the question of kind of fit with my family and how we tend to have names was really important to me. And for others, it can be important to maybe, as you said, distance oneself.
So, when you went through choosing your name, was there a family naming pattern? Is that what you're saying?
We're we're a mix of, how do I put this, kind of very weird New Englanders and Jewish Hungarian Roma. So that's influenced the names in our family. And then I personally was originally named after a favorite grandfather on both sides of the family who had the same name. My middle name was after another favorite grandfather. And, I would say my siblings had names that kind of followed a pattern. They're an Evelyn, William, my younger brother and sister, respectively.
Right. So, those seem to be very classic English names then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you change your middle name too?
I actually just slapped an E on it, making it feminine and French. Martin to Martine. Apparently, Grandpa Marty was a good guy. I never met him.
So, generally, to your knowledge, at what point in the process does a trans person start thinking about their new name?
It can really depend. And I've known trans people who have changed names several times over the course of their life, sometimes related to transition, sometimes more related to a process of personal understanding. In part because I don't want to step on any toes. I haven't really gotten into it with anyone who I know who's done that, who hasn't volunteered an explanation. But I think that if you've gone through, that sort of process as part of your personal identity once, it certainly makes sense as sort of the symbolism, the tools for other big events in life, big changes. And it's already a part of many human traditions.
Right.
So for me, it was, I would say that for a while I was a little split on keeping my birth name or the somewhat androgynous nickname that I used to be called by, but it wasn't quite enough of a difference for me. Things sort of came to a head probably a year, maybe half a year before I really started being a visibly trans person in society and maybe taking sort of more visible steps about my public identity. I'm a bit of a planner. I like to know things in advance.
Right. And, we come upon parents who say that, oh, I've had a list of names since I was 16, or somebody who's like, the baby's due in 2 hours and I need a name. So there is definitely a spectrum in when you start thinking about it.
Yeah. And I've delivered and cared for babies where the parents are like, we haven't decided yet.
Yeah. Now, I would imagine that starting to use the new name in everyday life is part of the coming out process and could be extremely scary. Is this one of the biggest hurdles of transitioning, asking friends and family to use your new name?
It can be. It's definitely something, especially with family that, I mentioned being named after, feel really revered people in the family, that can hit a lot of emotional heartstrings. There can be a lot of that complication. It is a very visible and potentially frightening part of transition. And I remember it didn't even seem like a real thing that I would have to grapple with until someone that I was working with at Occupy Oakland just asked me, hey, who knew me online, just asked, hey, should I call you Olivia? And I actually was speechless for a second. At the time, I was not doing so hot, in the self-esteem department. But hearing that sort of affirming question from someone I trusted did help me start thinking, wait, no, I should want that, right? Like that's that's a fine thing to want,
Absolutely.
so that kind of helped me.
Was it difficult to get people to call you by your new name?
I think especially for the first couple of months, situations where I had to correct people, and situations where there were some family members that I was still kind of talking to regularly about my transition who were not terribly approving. And there are some dynamics that go into that in terms of, well, a power struggle and many of the different ways that people can intentionally or otherwise try and make trans people feel like, we're lesser, or like we need to be,
Or invalidate it.
yeah, like we need to be told what's what by other people.
Right. I can imagine it might be difficult for parents too who actually chose the assigned name.
Yeah.
And are so used to calling you by it.
And I have really loving, supportive parents, and it was really hard. We did some family therapy. Something hard for me was drawing some boundaries and trying to convey that, I love my family, I care about all of them, but for my own survival, I was not in a place where anything I was doing could happen on their terms. So that was hard, but we worked it out.
Right. Do you think that a majority, now I know you don't know, and I also want to put this out there, is that we are doing a survey.
I saw that.
Yeah, and we're putting that on our site because I'm really interested in this topic and I'd like to gather some data on transgender naming. Do you think that it's important for the new name to be more gendered rather than gender neutral to aid in the process?
It was for me. And that's something that really was relevant for me. Some of that was, I think, just how I happened to feel about it. Some of it was a sense of, when you're coming out, you get a sense that you won't be believed, and it can often be reinforced. I remember friends who thought I was doing some kind of a weird bit, things like that. And I think whether you intend to or not, certainly the struggles we have, we can end up defining ourselves a little bit in opposition to them as well.
Right.
Which isn't always a bad thing.
Right. Do you think there's a difference in male to female or female to male in the criteria in choosing a name?
There are some sort of cultural trends that I think are different between trans men and trans women. It's certainly some kind of cheap jokes about, well, there's lots of Laurens and Susans versus Aidens and Claytons. And, those don't really hold, because for trans people, I think time and development can be a really different thing over the lifespan, because we end up making sort of these breaches from what other people expect our identity to be. And so you see a lot of micro generations where, what trans culture is in another area or, 2 years later might be very subtly different, but still very different.
Mm-hmm. So some of the things I think that I asked on the survey was, did you keep your initials?
I did not. I kept the last two, and actually ended up, my initials actually form kind of a medical pun. OMD is sort of a derisive shorthand for outside medical doctor. So I could be abbreviated and known as OMD, OMD, MD.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah, I realized that later, and I love it.
Or maybe it was subconscious.
Maybe, I don't know. I was really smug, though, a couple years after I picked my name. Olivia was top newborn name of the year, 2016.
Yeah, it's become hugely popular.
I wonder if Fringe has anything to do with that. That was a good show.
Yeah, and then Olivia Pope, right, too? So
right,
that was Scandal. So I think that might have had something to do with it, too. There were some great Olivia characters. So I was going into like the criteria for choosing the new names. Do they keep their initials? You didn't. Maybe using the same letter or elements, or using a completely different name.
That can be very common, yeah. For me, it was more completely different, but something that fit in, again, with the sort of family stuff, like didn't make me feel out of place. And, like I mentioned, depending on how your family is, someone may end up feeling very much the opposite. But I think after I realized I didn't want to keep or feminize my birth name, I kind of just mulled over it for 2 or 3 weeks. One of the things that people do is they'll look up the U.S. Census naming frequencies for their year. So you can see, here's the assigned name I have, and then here's the equally most popular name for, girls or boys or what have you. And then I just kind of mulled over it for a couple of weeks, and then I was like, oh yeah, Olivia, that's right.
So another very public transition was Chastity Bono to Chaz, and he chose to keep a very similar element to his name, almost shortening it. I always thought the name Chastity was horrible anyway. It's what we call an expectation name or a puritanical name, that they can't possibly meet.
Those are coming back in style, ironically. I know some trans girls who pick those names precisely out of that sort of oppositional impulse. I think it's great.
Oh, that's funny. Like kind of ironically.
Yeah.
That's
we're big
interesting.
On irony.
Yeah. So it's interesting to me. So we have like Bruce to Caitlin, which was completely different. And then Chastity to Chaz, which is very similar. And it would be interesting to talk to him to see what the thought behind that was, if it was because of the family or he just felt like he identified with the name closely.
Yeah, I think folks can come to transition with various ideas of gender fluidity as well, different cultural backgrounds that attach different importance to names. And then just a different sense of style. In some ways it's a real flex to just be like, yeah, I just chopped off some letters. I'm good to go.
Right.
This is me. And it helps with, one of the things that's hard is feeling the lost history of you survived transition. You're in a really good place as a person. You have this whole life that in some ways interacts with you, with the world. How you talk about that, especially to other people, maybe acquaintances, people at work, is kind of complicated. And if you decide to do editing and stuff, can be exhausting.
Right. So I guess the final step in the process is to legally change your name. And I've heard that is exhilarating and that kind of just solidifies everything. Did you feel that when you finally changed your name legally?
Oh, yeah. It was a big deal. The practical implications are, of course, huge in terms of safety, being able to have that formal recognition to the extent one respects the U.S. government, being able to have a card with your name on it, have bank accounts with your name on it. It's incredible. And for me, I was one of the last few handfuls of folks to transition under the old system in California, where you had to put your name, former and future, in the newspaper with your address.
Oh, my God.
So that anyone who had a problem could object. And then you had to appear in court. And I almost had that derailed because I got jury duty the week before and got into a situation where the judge was transphobic, was incited by my appearance and the conflict between how I looked and what my legal name was. And she attempted to both publicly humiliate me in court and force me to join her DUI case, which would have made me miss my court date.
Oh, my God.
But yeah, that was horrifying. And I definitely did not leave my room the rest of the day after that one.
Oh, my God.
But I won.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And now you said that was the old way of California. So they don't make you publish that anymore?
No, and you don't even have to appear in court. It's much less expensive. It's much closer to a self-service process, just like up here in Oregon now as well. And it was a really lucky time for me, too, because I was a researcher. I was getting laid off every year because of funding, and I was right between two different positions. So I could, at the same time, transition to working with new people. When I realized, okay, I know what my name is, I've got that sorted out, that was about 2 weeks before I started my second of 3 lab positions, again, because the layoff cycle. And I start this new job knowing that sometime in the next 9 to 12 months, I'm going to have some difficult conversations with the people I'm getting to know and going to be working with. And I learned that my boss's daughter's name is Olivia, and she used to work at this lab in the desk that I'm working at on all of the projects that I was working at.
Oh my gosh.
So at some point, I have to tell my boss, who, I don't know anything about and don't know anything about what their sensibilities are, that I happen to have the same name as her daughter. So that was very awkward, but it would have been, I think, much worse for me to try and pick a different one in response, Your name's your name.
And how did your boss respond?
Things got decidedly more awkward with my transition. I'll never know to what extent the name was involved or not. I did not have the heart to directly provide that information. So what I did was I leaked it to the biggest gossip in the lab. And then I pretended to talk about it for the first time 2 weeks later.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it worked out as well as I think it could have.
How long ago was that?
That would have been 2011. I had my name changed, finalized in 2012.
Do you think in 2020 it's going to be easier, harder, or the same?
That's a difficult question. I mean, in terms of the legal processes, in many states, it's easier. In a few states and unfortunately, a growing number of countries, Poland, Hungary, Romania, Russia, Ukraine, there are efforts to revoke our legal right to transition. So long story short is, things are getting really bad in this country, and we're in really messed up times. But fortunately, in several states, it's gotten easier.
Olivia, thank you so much for joining us and for lending your voice to this episode. I really appreciate it.
You as well.
Yeah, we know from the letters we receive that many trans persons use our site to find their new names, and we're so happy to be of service.
I hadn't realized that. That's awesome. I'm so glad.
Yeah. So, Dr. Danforth wrote me after the interview and wanted to explain that her perspective was focused on binary names as they pertain to trans men and trans women, and that there are many who go through a non-binary or gender variant transition.
Yes, that was my experience, and that can affect name choice too.
So, Kees, I know your story, but tell our listeners how and why you chose your new name.
Well, it was, I feel like, a slightly atypical trans experience with picking a name, because I feel like I hadn't quite accepted my identity yet.
Right.
And even before that, I had always disliked my name. And so I got to the point where I was starting to get used to the idea of being non-binary. But I was still afraid to change my name. It didn't feel like an option, especially because it just seemed like my family wouldn't be super on board and stuff like that. But then I started to think of, but what if? Just what if I changed my name? Well, what would I change it to?
Mm-hmm.
And I started a topic, actually, on the babynames.com forums. And a bunch of people had good suggestions. I posted a photo of myself to kind of help to see, what name might fit me.
I remember that.
Yeah, well, actually, Jennifer, you were the reason that I found my name. Because
oh my gosh.
You suggested using letters from my birth name, which is Kelsey. And in the trans community, we generally call that our dead name. Mm-hmm. And most of the time, it's considered like if someone wants to tell you their dead name, they will. But otherwise, it's something that people like to kind of keep private because that's not their name anymore. Mm-hmm. You suggested Kyle, but I have a cousin named Kyle and a friend named Kyle, but it inspired me to go look at a list of names that start with K and have other letters that were my birth name.
Wow.
So I was looking through the list and I came across Kees, and it's a Dutch name. It's the Dutch form of Cornelius.
Spell it.
Kees. It's also somewhat commonly spelled Cees.
But pronounced like Case, Case.
Yes, correct. Okay. Which was one thing I really liked about it, was that it was a very familiar sound despite it not being the most intuitive to pronounce in English. So it just felt right. It was just one of those feelings that it just, as soon as I saw it and discovered how it was pronounced, it almost felt like it picked me. It's not the kind of name I ever expected to pick for myself.
Now, do you have Scandinavian background?
I do have Scandinavian background. My great-grandmother was Norwegian, and she lived to be 99, though, so I knew her well into my late teens, and so she was like a grandmother to me. And so I really wanted a Scandinavian name, but that's not the name that picked me.
Right.
But when I did change my name, I also changed my middle name, and I did pick the name Solveig, which is a Scandinavian name.
Cool. Now, how did your friends and family react at first, and how long did it take until they were comfortable calling you Kees?
Most people were pretty good about it. I did, and I think this is one of the things I regret the most, is I did almost try and hoodwink people. I wasn't ready to kind of explain to people that it was related to gender, and so I made up this kind of weird story about how, like, it just somehow became a nickname of mine, and I wanted to go by it full time, because I felt like I had to legitimize it somehow. It should have been enough to just, I didn't feel like my birth name fit me, even though it's a nice name. And that should have been enough, but there was a lot of insecurity there.
Right.
So I made a post on Facebook. First, I decided to socially change my name and not legally change it, so I could spend time with it. So I announced on Facebook. I asked my family and friends to call me Kees, and it took a bit, especially because it starts with the same letter.
Right.
And I didn't think about the fact that that kind of muscle memory, when people would start to say my name, their brain would just supply my birth name.
Right.
And so I think that is something I didn't expect, was that even people who were super excited, it was a bit difficult to make that transition.
So that could almost be, like you said, a little bit of a drawback if you choose a new name that's too similar to your birth name.
For sure. I think some people it would help, because it can be, even if you really want to change your name, it can be really an uncomfortable change, because humans are notoriously bad at change, even good change.
Right.
So it's something that I can see why it would make people more comfortable, but I do think it made the transition period more difficult.
Is there anyone who still calls you by your birth name, and how do you handle that?
There are some people. There's one person in my life who is supportive, but does have a bit more of a difficulty with just remembering, and which is totally fine. But it's tough, because it's weird, because my birth name does not feel like my name anymore. When I do accidentally get called that, it's this weird, like, out-of-body experience or something. It's like, being called a name that's not your own, but it's still something you're familiar with somewhat. It's
Right.
very strange.
Well, I kind of feel that too if somebody calls me Jenny, and that's only somebody who's known me since I was a young child.
Yeah, it is a very jarring feeling. So yeah, it's just weird. But I know that they're trying, and change, like I said, is really hard. But most people, like, that I'm close to, they've completely made the change.
That's great.
And I have some people who I know my mom, for example, she didn't dislike my birth name, but it wasn't always her favorite, and she feels like Kees fits me more.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and that's always nice to hear, is to feel like people feel like it was a good choice.
Well, especially your parents, too, who chose the name in the first place,
Yeah.
So what advice would you give non-binary people who want to change their name?
I think try and find that confidence in your identity as much as possible. Figure out really what do you want. It's really tough to, I think, get over that feeling of, are people going to judge me? Or, like, it doesn't feel like, but I can't change my name. It feels like something that's impossible to people, or it feels like that they have to keep other people's opinions in mind. And at the end of the day, I really think it's important to make sure it's whatever's the best decision for that person first and foremost.
That's great. Well, we appreciate you talking about your story, and I hope it helps anyone out there who is looking to change their name during transition or otherwise, or just to educate those who have not heard this information before. I believe that learning and understanding leads to inclusion.
For sure.
If you're thinking about changing your name, at least here in the U.S., the laws differ by state. Check out our page on name changing and the requirements per state on babynames.com. It's in the menu under Name Advice, Name Change Laws.
Have you changed your name or have feedback about the show? Write us at podcast@babynames.com. And if you're going through or have gone through gender transition, we'd love for you to take our name survey. Go to babynames.com/surveys and click on the link.
And now it's time for Celebrity Baby News.
Well, we have some fun celebrity baby news today from over the past couple of weeks. First of all, Lyra and Alec Baldwin announced that they had a son on September 8th. This is Alec's 5th child and their 4th together. Lyra announced the name as Eduardo Pau Lucas Baldwin. Now, all of their baby names have been rooted in Spanish culture. Their others being Leonardo, Carmen, Romeo, and Raphael. I think those are all very romantic. Hilaria was born in Mallorca, Spain.
British singer Ed Sheeran and his wife Cherry Seaborn announced the birth of their first child, a girl named Lyra Antarctica Seaborn Sheeran.
I think it's Lyra.
Oh, is it Lyra? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Lyra is a musical name and might be a nod to Sheeran's favorite book series, His Dark Materials, by Philip Pullman, where one of the main characters is named Lyra.
And I heard that just 9 months prior to the birth, Ed and Sherry had been vacationing in Antarctica, so it's most probable that they were honoring the place of little Lyra's conception. Singer-songwriter Usher is reported to be expecting his third child with his girlfriend, music executive Jen Goycochea. Usher has 2 older sons, Usher, who's 12, and Naveed, 11, from ex-wife Tamika Foster.
Singer-songwriter Robin Thicke announced that he and his partner, model April Love Geary, are expecting their third child together. Robin and April share 2 daughters together, Mia, 2, and Lola, 18 months. Robin has a 10-year-old son named Julian with ex-wife Paula Patton.
Okay, Twilight fans, actor Kellen Lutz, known for playing Emmett Cullen in the Twilight Saga film series, is expecting his first child with wife Brittany. This comes after losing a daughter 6 months into Brittany's previous pregnancy last year. So we wish the couple well. Kees, we just did the Twilight Names episode. Do you think Kellen will choose a Twilight name?
You know, I lean towards no. I think that would cause quite the fervor.
And he might just have had enough of it.
Maybe. Actor couple Leighton Meester and Adam Brody revealed that they had a son, but they have not yet revealed the name. They have been ultra private about their older daughter, born in 2015. Their daughter has a historically male name, Arlo Day, and I wonder if they're going to go gender neutral on this one too.
I don't know. I would guess they would. I think they're going to go gender neutral. If they went so far as to name their daughter Arlo, I think they're going to stick with that naming convention.
Yeah, I could see that too.
Yeah. All right. And now we go on to our last segment, which is taking letters from you, our listeners. So here's the first one. My boyfriend and I are planning on getting pregnant soon, and I'm obsessed with baby names, so I'm binging on the Baby Names podcast. Yay. My name is Wilnely Casado, and I looked it up on your website and saw it wasn't there. I am from Dominican Republic and thus pronounce it differently in English and Spanish. In Spanish, I pronounce it the same way as it's spelled, Wilnely, Wilnely. In English, I omit the L because it sounds too close to will, so just Winnely. Growing up, I hated my name because nobody ever knew how to pronounce it, so I simply went by Nellie. I'm 24 years old now and have learned to love my name and actually go by it. When someone doesn't know how to pronounce it, I simply teach them how to pronounce it. I don't know where my name came from, but my father's name is Wilkins, so I just always figured it came from his name. I'd love to hear your opinion on my name, and I love your podcast. Well, thanks, Wilnely. I think it's cool. I mean, and I love that you now accept that it's different and you teach people how to pronounce it. You shouldn't really worry about what other people think or whether they can pronounce it. You teach them how to pronounce it. What do you think, Kees?
I agree. There is something that about reclaiming that, like, it's your name. It's
right.
You know, people should pronounce it the way it's pronounced. You know, it's your life, your name. They have to do what exists already. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And we talked about that in both your interview and Dr. Olivia's interview. It's like, and Dr. Panizzi's, it's like people should accommodate you because it's your identity and your name.
Yes, exactly.
All right. And why don't you read the second letter?
Sounds good. I just listened to your Twilight episode because I really want to name my baby Carlisle, but for a girl. I've seen on some forums that this is too Twilight, however I don't have an association with the book, and it is a super nice character apparently, so I don't see why it would be a problem. Is it okay that it is a female? It is after the town on the England-Scotland border where my surname, Armstrong, originated. I think it's super classy and cool as I live in the South USA and surnames for girls or boys are kind of in. We are thinking Carlisle Anna or Carlisle Lenora to honor my grandmother with the middle name.
I really think that's cool. You know, I never thought of Carlisle as a girl's name, but it has a lot of elements that are similar to girl's name with the two L's. Lyra is in, and Lily. And also Carla is a female name. So it's not really too reaching or stretching to think that Carlisle would fit for a girl's name. And then when I was emailing with her, she mentioned that Isla is kind of a name element that fits too, Isla.
Oh, yeah.
That is very similar to Carlisle.
Yeah, I think it definitely could fit, especially in the South where surnames as first names are really common.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that it being on a girl actually makes it feel less Twilight.
Right. Yeah.
If it was on a boy, I feel like it would feel more overt that way. But on a girl, I think people would be more quick to assume that it's after a family member or something else.
That's a really good point. And like we said in the Twilight episode, Carlisle just never hit the charts. So it's not one of those names like Jasper or Emmett that became super popular because of the series.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So our next show is going to be on dictionary names. Those are names that started as words like meadow, chase, justice, and more.
And then coming up in October, we're going to have a super fun episode on gaming naming where we talk to Lee Perry, former lead developer at Epic Games, and voice actor Matt Mercer, Dungeon Master from the hit web series Critical Role.
That's going to be a great episode. I'm really excited about that one.
So make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen so you don't miss an episode.
That's the show. Thank you so much for stepping in, Kees, and lending your voice to our show.
Of course, thank you so much for having me.
Take care and stay safe. Stay inside and wear your masks when you go out. Bye, everybody.
Bye.